I remember the first time I realized something wasn't adding up with the Iraqi markets. Everyone kept talking about deleting the three zeros like it was some kind of magic jackpot. But the people who actually make money, the quiet investors, the institutions, the people who don't run to YouTube every time the wind blows, they were watching something completely different. They weren't staring at dinar notes. They were staring at the Iraqi Stock Exchange. And that's when it hit me. The real transformation, the real wealth, sits in the companies, not the currency. And if you study Iraq's financial history, the clues have been there for decades. Back in October 2003, at the Madrid International Donor Conference, 76 countries and global institutions pledged over $33 billion in grants and loans for Iraq's reconstruction. That moment, just months after the fall of Saddam, was the first major signal that the world wasn't betting on dinar notes. They were betting on Iraq's economic rebuild, its infrastructure, and ultimately, its corporate sector. Then in July 2016, the US, Germany, Japan, Kuwait, Canada, and the Netherlands co-hosted the Washington Pledging Conference, raising more than $2 billion in stabilization and humanitarian support. 26 donor nations contributed over $590 million for urgent humanitarian relief alone. Every dollar went toward stabilizing institutions, rebuilding public systems, and creating the environment where companies, not currencies, can thrive. The biggest fundraising moment came in February 2018 during the Kuwait International Conference for the Reconstruction of Iraq. Countries pledged approximately $30 billion in investment support. Turkey offered $5 billion. The United States pledged $3 billion in credit lines. Saudi Arabia came in with $1.5 billion. Qatar pledged $1 billion, and Kuwait pledged $2 billion. And none of this money went to currency speculation. Every dollar was aimed at reconstruction, energy, banking, logistics, reform, and modernization. And if you really want to understand where the future is pointing, look at the corporate side. Siemens Energy signed multi-year service contracts for Iraq's power stations. GE Vernova is upgrading the national grid. TotalEnergies signed a $27 billion deal in 2023 for oil, gas, and energy development. BP, Chevron, and China's majors have re-entered and expanded their positions. In May 2023, the Development Road Summit in Baghdad brought together ministers from Turkey, Iran, Syria, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, because Iraq isn't a side conversation anymore. It's a regional corridor. All of that speaks louder than any currency rumor ever will. So let's talk about what nobody says out loud. Deleting the three zeros is not a wealth event. It doesn't multiply your money. It doesn't magically explode your bank account. All it does is clean up Iraq's currency so the country can finally communicate with the global system like a normal economy. But once you understand what that unlocks, you start to see why the ISX is where the real upside lives, especially for local Iraqi holders and American investors sitting patiently on millions of shares. Because when Iraq's currency becomes stable, modern, and globally readable, something big happens. The doors open. And when those doors open, foreign investors stop sitting on the sidelines. They start entering the market with money that makes the ISX look tiny. Imagine a market worth $16 to $20 billion total. Then imagine just one global giant like BlackRock, Saudi PIF, Qatar Investment Authority, or ADIA showing up with $5 to $10 billion and pointing it at Iraqi banks, telecoms, logistics companies, and industrials. Let's use a real example. Bank of Baghdad is trading around 3.58 IQD per share. In US dollars, that's about $0.0027, a fraction of a penny. This is the part most investors overlook because they're too busy arguing about the currency. But look at what happens when global money hits a tiny price like that. If Bank of Baghdad simply gets re-rated to a normal valuation, something emerging markets experience all the time, you're looking at 90 IQD per share. That's a 25 times gain. Your $0.0027 becomes roughly 6.7 cents. That alone is life-changing if you're holding millions of shares. But what happens when we move beyond normal valuation and into institutional reality? Think about this. Gulf banks like Qatar National Bank, Emirates NBD, and Saudi banking groups are already expanding regionally. If one of them decides Iraq is the next frontier, a takeover price of 200 to 300 IQD is not fantasy. That's how acquisitions happen in new markets. 250 IQD is roughly 69 times your entry price. But now let's go deeper than that. Because there's a scenario nobody ever talks about, because it sounds extreme until you actually run the math and understand how global markets work. If Iraq revalues its currency to 1-to-1 with the US dollar, and then allows the currency to float on top of that, something extraordinary happens. Your shares do not get reduced. Your millions of shares do not disappear. Your position does not shrink. Your share count stays the same. What changes is the currency used to value them. Right now, Bank of Baghdad at 3.58 IQD is valued in a non-convertible currency. But if Iraq moves to 1 IQD, 1 USD, then one share valued at 800 IQD becomes 800 US dollars. Let me repeat that, $800 per share. And it happens automatically because currency convertibility is a multiplier, and your share count does not change. And here's what makes it even more startling. Gulf banking peers routinely trade at valuations equivalent to 400 IQD per share, 700 IQD per share, 900 IQD per share, even 100 plus IQD per share. Once Iraq joins that valuation neighborhood, once its currency becomes recognized, stable, and globally settled, the ISX cannot remain priced in isolation. It must harmonize with regional valuation laws and international investment logic. That is how your $0.0027 becomes 60 cents, $6, $60, $800 depending on the reforms and valuation model adopted. And this is exactly how frontier markets transition into emerging market valuations. It happened in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Vietnam, India, Turkey, and South Korea. Every time the system modernized and the currency normalized, equities repriced upward dramatically. This is why the ISX is the real story. Because when Iraq stabilizes, modernizes, and opens up, it's not just Bank of Baghdad that moves. Telecoms move, insurance moves, cement moves, logistics moves, industrials move, payment companies move. Every sector benefiting from a functioning modern system gets re-rated, and the early investors, the ones who position themselves before global convertibility, become the case studies everyone else reads about later. Ask yourself something. Why do institutions care more about companies than the currency? Why do they study banking assets, telecom networks, cement output, balance sheets, capital requirements, market share, but never obsess over the dinar notes themselves? Because the wealth isn't in the notes. The wealth is in the transformation. Imagine if Iraq's financial system finishes what it started. Imagine if the reforms line up. Imagine if institutional capital arrives. Imagine if your tiny positions today become the blue chip holdings of tomorrow. Before I wrap up, I want you to drop a comment and tell me this. Which ISX stock do you think has the highest upside once foreign capital enters? Banks, telecoms, cement, insurance, or industrials? I want to see where your mind is. Let me recap fast. Deleting the zeros doesn't make anyone rich. It simply prepares the system. The real upside is in the companies. When Iraq becomes globally investable, valuations explode the same way they did across every emerging market in the last 50 years. Bank of Baghdad at 3.58 IQD doesn't stay there forever. Under the right conditions, it can move to 90, 250, 450, even 800 IQD. And if the IQD ever moves to 101 with the USD, that's $800 per share. That is where the wise middle-class citizens quietly become multimillionaires and some multi-billionaires. This is Amira Blake, and if you found value in this breakdown, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you have questions, drop them in the comments because I'll turn your best questions into a follow-up video. Before I go, remember, I am not a financial advisor, this is not financial advice, and I'm not engaging in insider trading. This content is for informational and educational purposes only, created to help both local Iraqi investors and foreign American investors understand the bigger picture behind the market they're part of.